Hello everybody, welcome to my studio. Lonna here. I'm so happy you stopped in to paint with me today. We're going to paint a fun Christmas painting today. I've titled this one Spirit of Christmas. So if you're ready, let's grab our paints and supplies and let's get to painting. Alright, let's work on the background on this surface here. I've already applied a coat of multi-purpose sealer. If your back surface feels a little textured, you can sand it. I'm going to wait till after I get my paint on here and sand it to a smoothness, because that little bit of texture is going to help the paint stick. So I've got some colors out here. I've got white, gingham blue, Grecian blue, dragon teal, black, and burnt umber. Not really sure what colors I'm going to use, but I really want to make the background look different. So I'm going to start with my gingham blue, and we'll have to apply 2 layers, and I just want to be kind of messy with this. I don't want perfection in here at all. I'm going to go into my darker blue and put some of that in. Generally, I paint my background white before I start when I'm working on a wood surface, but since I was going with some blues here, I thought I could get a couple of coats of paint on here and not have to worry about undercoating it with white. And now I'm going into some dragon teal, and our second layer is when we're going to add some darker colors in there. Maybe that's why I put them out. So I'm going to wipe the excess paint off my brush and kind of just gently blend these where they meet. Smooth out some of those brush strokes. We don't really have to smooth out too much on it, because you know, the more choppy it looks, I think the better. So that's our first layer on here. I'm going to get this dry, and then we're going to go right into a second layer and see if that covers everything. If not, we'll go into a third layer. So let me get it dry. Okay, this is where I want to sand in between my layers once it's dry, so we can start building up smooth layers here. I'm going to go back in with my light blue. I think I'm going to add a little bit of white to it just to lighten it up just a little bit. I don't want it too light because I'm going to add some white for my highlight into the background. Go into that darker blue. And then some of that dragon teal. Okay, I want to wipe the excess paint off my brush so I can blend these. I want to do it while it's wet, don't let it dry. If you use a heat tool to dry your surface, make sure that your surface is dry before you go in with your paint, because it's immediately going to set your paint, and then you're not going to be able to do this little bit of blending here. Now remember, this is just background, so we don't have to, you know, get too caught up in it. We just want something really pretty behind our snowman and the bird. I think I'll put a little bit more of the teal over here. That looks pretty nice. Now I'm going to dry this. I didn't put heavy layers of paint on here, so drying it should not take very much time at all. I'm going to rinse my brush. I want to make sure it's cool. You know, cool from the heat. We don't want it cool like you just painted it. If it feels cool, that means the paint's not dry. But if you heat set it, you want to make sure your surface is cool before you go in. And I'm going to pick up a little bit of white here. and I want to add a little bit of this maybe back behind where the snowman's going to be. So I'm going to clean my brush off and just kind of scrub that out, just making a background highlight here. Smooth it out, just tickle smooth it. Okay, if you feel like you're losing anything, go back into some of your other paints, pick them up, and blend, blend, blend. Over here we're going to have the snowman, so we don't have to worry so much about it. I don't want to lose my teal or my other blue. I just want to make sure that we've got some nice blended color here. And I'm just using a flat brush, just kind of very messily taking care of that. So that kind of gives us a little bit of light color back there. It's not quite as light as I want it to be. So I think what I will do is dry it and try and get a little bit more lightness back in there. Just want a little bit of a glow behind our snowman here. Alright, put quite a bit in there, so now I'm just going to take a baby wipe and tap. And just kind of soften that down in there, just to get a little bit of a kind of highlight back in there. Hopefully I've got it in the right place for my snowman when he goes on here. I mean, my snowman might completely cover that up. We'll just have to see how it works out here. Okay, I think I want to add a little bit of burnt umber in with my dragon teal. Just a little bit. Just dirty up that just a little bit. I want a little bit of darker stuff down here. Just going to kind of scrub that in. And take my baby wipe and blend it just a little bit. Because I'm dry brushing here, so I want to make sure that I don't leave any harsh stuff here. Okay, like I said, we're not going to see a lot of this in here, so just wanted it a little bit darker down there. So I think that is a nice little kind of layering of color, kind of goes from light to a medium to a dark color down here with our bright little glow right there, just slightly, well, mostly in the center right here. So I think we're ready to add our line drawing on now. Okay, I'm going to do a step I'm not a huge fan of because of the mess it makes, but I'd like to have a little snow kind of blowing around in the background. So I've thinned some white paint with some water, and I'm just going to try to splatter it. You can lay a piece of paper over your snowman, which is what I originally intended to do, but did not do. So I'm going to take a baby wipe and remove those splatters here in a second. I'm just using a flat brush. I do like to use a rake brush because of the fine hairs that come off the end. It makes the paint seem to come off the brush a little bit better. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So I'm going to take my wipe and dab at the ones that are in my snowman, in the hat. Again, lay a piece of paper over this so that you don't get it all in there where you don't want it. Do not scrub on this because you'll just remove your line drawing. I think I'll take a small brush and remove out of the bird. I don't want it. Anything thin in there is fine. But if it's something that's a pretty thick little dot that you don't want to see anywhere, baby wipe or a damp paintbrush. Just remove what you do not want in there. Okay, we've got our splattering is dry. So we're going to start working on the snowman, and I accidentally put in my carrot nose, so I'm just going to paint over that because that's not at all what I want to have on there right now. So I'm going to take my white and that gingham blue and mix just kind of a pale blue color that we can start with. I mean, a really light blue that we can just kind of start painting in our snowman kind of loosely. I'll pick up some of that darker blue. Let it kind of blend in. This will be the shadow side over here. And it's very loose, very loose. Go down here with that light blue, and we'll put some down here on the snowman. We're not going to see a lot of the snowman down here, so I'm not going to worry too much about how this looks down here. And then we have a little bit of the snowman over here. Okay. Okay, we'll have to get this dry so we can get another layer on there. While that is kind of drying, we can put a layer on our scarf. I was not 100% sure what color I wanted to paint the scarf because our bird is going to be red. I thought about doing green. I might do green since our bird is going to be red. Okay, so I'm going to try Amazement and see how that works in there. I'll use some Amazement and maybe a little bit of white. Maybe a little bit of a brighter green. See what we come up with for the scarf. I don't know yet. So we'll just start by kind of shaping out our scarf. This is literally just dabbing in some paint, not even thinking about how it's going in. Just dab, dab, dab. And pick up a little bit of that darker green and do this little piece of the scarf that we can see down here. And then we'll need it a little bit darker on this side. This is the shadowy side, so we can blend a little bit of the two colors in there. And then we'll go up to the hat. And we'll do the same. Just kind of loosely blend that. Tap it in there. A bit more of that darker green out here. Just dab, 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 okay? Maybe get a little bit of white so I can define the edge of this a little bit. Okay, so we've got, this is very, very loose, rough painting in here. I don't want you to, you know, overthink it at all, because this is just kind of a messy little laying it in. If we do this with each layer, you're going to be so amazed at the kind of depth that you get. But if you are a more smooth painter, then by all means you can just kind of base coat it in very smoothly and get your look that way. Okay, I'm going to start a second layer on my snowman here. Start with some white. Oh, too much moisture in my brush, let me get that out. Still just very kind of loosely painting this in. Go into that lighter blue and start adding some of that in here. And then some of the, a little bit of the darker blue. Wipe your brush off if you get a lot of paint there, because then we're just going to very gently blend this out, kind of wet into wet. And a little bit more of that lighter blue. Pick up, clean your brush out and pick up a little bit more white if you need to kind of blend that out a little bit. So we should have a nice gradation of color going on there. I'm going to grab a little bit of the darker blue and stick that in on these two areas, and then a little bit of the lighter blue. Bring that over quite a ways. And then some white right here. Wipe my brush off, and then we'll just go and start blending. Dirty brush into every color. Wipe my brush off and then go to this little section here, which will remain mostly a blue, darker blue color. Okay, we're going to do the same thing for the scarf. We're just going to lay in a little bit of each color. I'm going to add a little bit of burnt umber. I think I want to darken my dark green just a little bit. Okay, that was like enough paint for 50 million paintings here. So I'm going to take my dark side, and I added a tiny bit of burnt umber to my darker green here. And we're going to put some of that in. I'm just going to work on the hat first, and then we'll go down to the scarf. Then just the green by itself, a little bit through here. Wipe my brush off, and then we'll get that lighter green out through here, and then we're just going to blend, blend, blend. Slip, slap, messy, messy, going right into those colors and just blending it all. Wipe my brush off because I want to make sure I can blend this. So pick up a tiny bit of paint if you need it to help you blend. You want to do that while it is wet, so we should have a nice gradation of color. We're going to very easily be able to shade and highlight on that. And I mixed just a little bit of burnt umber in with my dark green for this second layer here. And down here will be, this will be just all dark right through here. And the green without the burnt umber. And I'm going to put a little bit of that up here. I'm going to wipe my brush off and grab the light green. This is just a very messy little wet blend. And then we can very easily shade and highlight on these. So we work quickly so that we can not let our paint dry. I should have done this one back here before I did the top up here. A little bit more of that green color, and then a little bit more of the darker right through there, not too much. Okay, so everything's got a second coat. Once it's dry, we can add our rest of our line drawing onto our face for the eyes, and we can put the carrot nose back in there. I think while it is getting dry, we're going to go ahead and lay a base coat in on the branch. And we're just going to use a small round for this. And I'm just going to base it in with some cocoa. So we've got 2 coats on the snowman now, so he's ready for details and shading and highlighting. And then we'll move on to other details. And this branch kind of goes underneath the bird here. You could put another small little branch coming off of it. The line drawing probably won't have that little branch, I don't know. He's got quite a wild branch there for that arm. And then this one, we're just going to see it coming off from him right there. So not really going to see much of that branch at all. But this arm's got a pretty good sized branch going on with it. Okay, let's get line drawing on. Okay, we're going to base coat in the carrot nose with our fresh mango color. Take a couple of coats. I put my lines here on with some gray graphite, but it was a very worn piece of graphite, so my lines wouldn't be very dark. So you can just barely see them. If yours is really dark, erase it back before you start painting. Inside the mouth, I'm going to paint with white. And we'll just go ahead and paint the entire eye in with white, and then we'll put our eye color in after this is nice and dry. And we've got 2 coats in here to make our eyes. And we'll want 2 coats with the inside the mouth as well. Okay, we'll go ahead and put a base coat with the bird. So we're going to use our crimson red. Crimson red. I'm going to mix a little bit of burnt umber with it so I can get my dark red value first. And we're going to paint everything in with this value. It will take a couple of coats. Both of these colors are a more semi-transparent or semi-opaque. They're a little transparent. Let's just put it that way. Okay, get our tail feathers here. And we'll add all the details onto the to our bird, you know, when we start building our layers. This is just our underpainting. Underpainting, okay? Not detail painting. Okay, now, the way the bird is facing, it's kind of facing away from the snowman. I'm going to have its tail feathers come over the branch here, instead of, you know, being on the back side of the branch. Depending on which side of the branch will determine which way the bird is kind of facing. Right now he's kind of facing away. So, you know, if you put your tail feathers on the other side of the branch, it's going to bring him facing more a little bit to the front. Okay? So we won't see his feet on this one because he's turned away from us. So we're not going to worry about bird feet. Okay? I'm going to go back over to my white and go ahead and put a second coat on these areas. And we're only going to do the one coat on the bird for now. Let's go ahead and get our eyes painted in a second layer. And our nose, our carrot nose, a second layer. Okay. All right, let's get these dry and we're ready to start adding our eye color in when everything is dry and getting some details on here. Okay, let's put a coat in the eyes. I mixed a little bit of my Grecian blue and some white. Get kind of a bright blue color. Give our snowman some cute blue eyes here. Okay, we'll let those dry and then repeat. Have to do a little shaping on that one. Maybe try and remove that paint right there because it got out a little bit farther than what I wanted. Alright, that's a little bit better. Okay, we want to put a second coat on that so that we can start adding shading and details on here. Alright, let's start on our little carrot nose, and I'm going to make a few little lines on the nose with some burnt umber. Okay, just a few on there. Don't get too crazy. I think we'll get some black out. We're going to need black for outlining some things. And we'll put a little dot in the eye. Okay. A little pupil in the eye. Alright, we're going to let that dry. We're going to start shading on the hat. So the hat band goes across like this onto here. Okay, we can definitely tell where the scarf is. We have to decide if we want to put any kind of pattern on the hat and scarf. And I was kind of thinking of doing a little sweatery type pattern. See how that's going to look. I'm going to go with white. See if I'm going to like it. I'm just making little V's. very messily. I'm not just rows of messy V's. That was really, really messy. Create some little pattern in our knit scarf. I think I'll add a little bit of that light green to my mix here. Okay, so that's the hat band. So we can move up to the hat itself. Go back to just straight white here. If you want to be much neater about your little V's on here, you certainly can. I'm being a little bit more loose with my painting because I just want it to have that kind of painterly feel. Okay, so we've got some little, I'm going to try and put some lines in between. And up here as well. Very loosely. I don't want anything to be super, super detailed. Okay, so we're going to come down here to the scarf, and I might draw my lines on here first. So let's say we got a line going here and one here. Okay, I'm going to go on the folded part. Okay, and then down here on this part we'll add a little bit of green to it so it's not quite so bright. We won't see much down there. Okay, then we can start with our white and start adding some of those little V's on here. In between our little lines that we drew. I'm going to mix a little bit of the green, the light green, in with my that mid-value green. This one is okay, and we're going to go across this. Mix a little bit of green in with your white in the darker areas, and as you go into a little bit lighter areas you can pick up more white. Have it mostly white. Okay, so there's our base on our scarf. Our little pupils are in. So we can go ahead and shade the hat, the snowman, all the facial features, and the arm. And then we'll come back and finish our little bird over here. All right, let's start adding some shading on our hat and scarf. So I'm going to take that darker green that I used, and I'm going to mix a little tiny bit of lamp black. That's our fairway green and a little bit of lamp black to make a dark green, and we want to go next to where the hat folds here. So we can create a little bit of shadow back behind. It's going to be darker over here. I'm going to let that dry before I continue on up there. I'm going to go around my scarf here on this edge. This is going to be mostly dark back through here. We're going to be dark down here. Next to the folded part of the scarf, we're going to be dark. I'm going to give it a little bit of some of this color here on the edge that goes around. You know, it's folded over, give it a little bit of a folded look. And then I think I'll put a little bit down here just for some shadow down there. Okay? We also want to go along the bottom of the scarf. And then we need to create a little bit of a fold in here. A little bit of fold right there in the scarf. Okay, so we're probably dry enough up here. I can add some shading on this outside edge of our hat. And mix a little bit more paint. Get some water in my brush so it's don't want it on my snowman. Just want it along there, and I'm going to darken back here a little bit. This is still just a washy float here. Okay, use your finger, smooth it out. Okay, I think we're looking pretty good on the shading part of the hat. I don't know if I want to put a little bit. I'm going to wait to see if I want to put a little bit along that bottom edge because we're going to shade underneath on the snowman itself. Okay, so that's our shading. Okay, and we can come along and repeat any of that that we need to. Our highlighting is going to be white. And it's still just a washy layer of white. So we're not going to cover up all of our details that we put on here. So I've got plenty of water in my brush so that I can keep from covering up anything that we don't want to cover up. Go down here and do a little highlight down here. A little bit through there. We're going to highlight this edge. And this is all with just white. Let's put a little bit here. You can do a tiny bit right there. Tiny bit right there. Kind of, take it off with your finger to brighten that. And I'm going to go a little bit along this edge because we're going to shade behind it. Okay. Put a streak of a line through there. Okay, that's good for the hat for our shading and highlighting for now. I might come back and brighten a little bit on some of our highlights. We shall see after we get the shading on the snowman done. That's kind of gonna tell us what more we need to do on our scarf and hat, but it looks super cute. So we're gonna move on to the face now. Okay, I'm gonna see if this will be a dark enough mix by mixing that darker blue, which is Grecian blue, with a little bit of burnt umber. And I don't want my snowman to turn black or overly dirty. Just want it to have a little bit of shading on this side. I'm going to grab a mop brush because that's very wet and I want to smooth that out a little bit. Mop brush is going to help me do that. Probably didn't have you on camera for that at all. I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of shading down here. This side will be in the shadow. Because I need that to dry a little bit before I go over there. So we'll go underneath the scarf here and next to the scarf. Just a little bit right there underneath that edge. Boy, I'm going to have to zoom out because keep getting you off camera. Okay, so my Grecian blue and a little bit of burnt umber. Just dirty up that blue. Let's go up here underneath. I gotta have a little bit of moisture. You can go with a much smaller brush than what I'm using. I'm using a 1/2 inch angle here. Okay, I'm just gonna scoot that out along the edge there because I don't want it to be too wide on that edge. I do want it to be a little bit wider back here. Okay, I want to do a narrow little bit here. A little shadow there, and then we're going to go underneath all of our facial features. So this is definitely where you might want to get a smaller brush. We'll go underneath the mouth. I'm going to thin that down just a little bit so it's not quite so incredibly wide there. Let's go underneath the line that we're going to be putting here. I'm using such a large brush, I'm going to be up on the tiptoe there. A little bit here. Kind of shape the mouth a little bit. I'm going to go under the nose. Smaller brush will probably do wonders here, but I'm going to stick with this bigger brush to show you that it can be done with a bigger brush if that's all you have. You can use a flat brush, you can use whatever kind of brush you want. I don't want it to be quite that wide. I want him to look like he's got bags under his eyes. Come on. I'm going to do a little bit right here. Again, taking that water edge and narrowing that down. I don't want this guy looking dirty, dirty, dirty. I feel like it could be a little bit darker back here, but we're going to work on a little bit of highlight. We're not going to, you know, be too detailed here with this highlight. I don't want a hard, super hard line. I just want to tap some white in on the lighter side of our snowman. Okay, just tap, tap, tap. Okay, back here he's not gonna have much light on him. Okay, I'm just looking at the scarf to see if I want to add more highlight on here now that I have some shading on my snowman. Okay, so brighten up just a few areas on there. All right. Let me see about just slightly darkening that. So I blew off my brush. Trying to make a dirty blue here and not have it completely fill my brush. So I can't smooth that out just a little bit. Give him some pink cheeks if you want. Really depends on the look you're going for. It always helps to do a second layer on your shading because it smooths everything out. Your first layer could be a little choppy. Don't really want shading all the way out there. That's where we want the white. Dab, 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 tap, tap, tap. A little brighter highlight out here. Now back here behind your snowman, if you feel like he needs more white back there, that's where you can go in and go ahead and dry brush a little bit more in there. And I think I'll put that in the instruction. It will be up to you whether you think it needs more or not. I feel like it could use a little bit. Try to get the moisture out of my brush as best I can. I'm going to put some in there and just use my finger to kind of... I'm not sure that's pure white because I feel like there's some green in my brush here. Alrighty, let's see where we at. I'm going to darken a little bit on my hat. Now this is where I want you to just play around with your shading and highlighting to see what you feel it needs. Darker back here. It's still pretty washy. No solid color. Because see, I can still see all my little lines in there. Okay, and this is where we had, you know, all of our other shading on here. So we can just go ahead and add a little washy wash of that color to just darken a little bit on our hat. Okay, he's looking so cute. We got to work on the nose now. I'm going to take some burnt umber and shade on the bottom of the nose. Burnt umber is pretty transparent, but we still need that water in our brush so it doesn't become too harsh here. Keep it soft. along the bottom edge there. Okay, I'm going to take my yellow, see if it's going to show up here. It's pretty transparent, so I might add some white to it. We're not using a whole lot of this yellow, so really any kind of yellow that you have will be just fine. Brighten the top edge of the carrot nose. And this yellow is very transparent, so you'll still see plenty of the orange underneath it. A few little lines on here. Let me actually get a detail liner maybe. And we'll just add a few little white highlight lines on here. And we'll put a little white along the top edge up here. Not a solid line, just some little lines. Okay. So on the bottom of the nose, if you need to clean up any of that burnt umber, you can do that. I might mix a little bit of burnt umber with my orange. That will smooth that out a little bit more. We don't want his nose to look so dirty. Okay, let's do some outlining on the facial features. And I'm just going to do that with some lamp black. So I'm going to thin some down with some water to get a good flow off of my little liner brush that I'm using here. And we're going to outline the mouth. Now you could do this with a permanent marker as well. And then we'll have some little lines there. I'm going to try and go around the eyes. I'm going to start on the black edge here. I need a longer bristled brush here. I'm using a short bristled brush and it's not doing the best job for me, so I'm used to a little bit longer bristled one, so I might find me a longer bristled brush. No, that one's too fat. Here we go. Also going to go around the blue part. And we'll put some highlights in here. 3. And the carrot nose, I'm not going to outline the carrot nose. I think that would be too bold of a choice there. But I think we're ready to move on to the... You can just make your eyes coal eyes, your mouth coal pieces. I mean, that's what I traditionally do. So I'm going to leave that option up to you. Let's work on the arms now. I think I'll give the snowman a little wrinkle line under the eyes before we go to the arms. And then maybe he's got some eyelashes. I don't know. Maybe it's a girl snowman. We don't know what it is. Okay. So I think with that being done, I definitely need to put some red on the cheeks. So I'm going to get me a small little scruffy type brush and go into my red. Using my brush dry, offloading it. I mean really offloading it because this red is incredibly bright. And we'll dry brush some pink cheeks. A little bit over here. And put a piece of paper on the nose. And maybe we'll put some of this red on the carrot. I don't know. Okay, that looks pretty good, I think, for a little color on the cheeks. And then up to you if you want to add a little bit of color on the carrot with some red. Totally optional. I'll leave that up to you. I do feel like I need at the corners of the mouth to shade just a tiny bit with some black. Very thin down a little bit of black, a little bit of shading inside the mouth. Okay, snowman is done, hat and scarf are done, branch time. Okay, so on the branches, I think we're going to take some burnt umber and add a little bit of dark color with our burnt umber. Just kind of streaking it through. We definitely want it dark next to the snowman's body on each side of our bird here. And then, you know, separate some of your branches. We want a little bit of color, darker color. And I'm just very loosely putting this on here. Very sketchily. I'm not trying to, you know, overdo too much. I don't want to fill my branch. I don't have any moisture basically in my brush. I'm just putting a little bit of this color in here. Little texture, little lines, okay? That was just our first little layer there. So now I'm going to come in with a little bit of black mixed in with that burnt umber in my brush. Just a tiny little bit. And we're just going to put this in a few key places. So let's mix a little bit of black on our brush with our burnt umber, just to darken that color. And we want to put it a little bit darker next to the body, and maybe where we have some dark shadows in some of our branches. This is just a few places, maybe next to our bird. It could be a little bit darker, definitely under our bird. Okay, and then we'll go over here and put a little bit next to the body here. This is just a straight paint mix. I've not you know, overly mixed it. And then I'm just going to pick a few places where I can put a little bit of this mix. Dry brushy, not doing a whole lot. Okay, that was our darkest shading color. Now we're going to highlight. And I'm going to take my cocoa and some white. Just do an equal mix. You know, you just need a lighter color than what the base is. And we'll just put some streaks in here. Now if you can't see yours, add more white to your mix. Get it a little bit lighter. And put a few dry brushy streaks in here. Again, don't overdo, we're just adding some highlights in here. This is going to be about all we do to our branches. Okay, over here we want a little bit on this one. Get the paint to come off my brush here. Okay, good enough. Alrighty. Okay, that was a big little blob right there. We're gonna leave the branch there. We don't really need to do very much to it. We don't have to technically shade it or highlight it like we would do with our floats and stuff. So yeah, just leave it right there. I do think this needs to be darker back here though. So I'm going to add a little bit of black in with my blue instead of that burnt umber. Because right underneath this hat part right here, it has got to be a little darker. Take my mop brush and soften that a little bit. Our snowman kind of goes off of this surface, so we can't really see the complete shape of his head or the complete shape of the scarf on this side, so we have to use our imagination there. Alright, and I need a little bit of darkness right there. And I'm just going to use a little wash of black right here. It's very washy. I really can't see that scarf kind of go, or the hat kind of going off that edge either. That was the blue mix, not the black and green mix. Alright, let's finish our bird up. Okay, this little bird right here, I don't know if I zoom you in, if I'm going to keep you on camera or not. I'm going to mix a little bit of black and white to get a kind of dark gray here. And just paint his little beak in. Maybe just a touch darker than that. And that's That's a ginormous beak for this little bitty bird. So we'll just see how that's gonna go. Okay, so this guy's pretty small, so we're gonna start out with some red, and we're just gonna lay some streaks of red in here. We'll define all of our shapes as we go here. Okay. I think I'll go down to my little bit smaller brush. I'll hang on to that one. I'm going to grab my detail brush so I can go into some black. And we'll start adding some black in here. Let's go under the wing. Wing goes back to there. Get a little bit of red. Make that not quite so stark of a black. And we'll start putting some stuff in here. We're going to add several layers on this little guy, but it's all just going to be very strokey. Oh, you'd probably like to be on camera, wouldn't you? Now, as far as the face goes, this will be black through here. See if I get this even remotely looking like a cardinal. Black up there, that seems like a lot of black, but we're gonna go with it. A few little black streaks, if we can, up here. This is all just detail, strokey stuff. Okay, I'm going to wipe my brush off, go back into that just red, and we'll start adding some of this in here. Up here. Put a couple little strokes on the tail, on the chest here. This is gonna look pretty messy because he's not a very big bird, so I don't want us getting caught up in too much of the details of this guy. Okay, let's do a little bit of light gray on the beak out here. You don't have to add a lot of detail there. We can add a little circle for an eye, maybe. I'm having a hard time getting my paint to flow off of this tiny little brush here. Goodness. I feel like I've got a ton of water in this, but it still doesn't want to flow off of this little bitty brush. Oh. Okay, I'm just going to make it big in here. And I'm just going to come back with my black and clean it up because that is not coming off of my brush very well. Okay, we just want that thin little line in there. Now I've got this pink color. I don't know, it might be too pink, which I thought about adding some highlight on here with. I can't use that brush. It's making too fat of strokes. So I mixed a little bit of white with it. We'll see how this looks on here. Okay, like I said, we're not trying to do realism here. This is so tiny, 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 tiny. Goodness, I don't know what's going on with this paintbrush, why I won't let the paint come off of it. Actually never ever had that trouble before. Generally when paint won't come off of it, it's because you don't have enough moisture in your brush to let it release out of the brush, but I've got tons of moisture in my brush. Alrighty, we're not going to worry too much about this bird because let's just give him some white streaks. A little bit on the chest, on top of his up there. We're not doing a lot to this guy. Just gonna try and make him look good enough to be a cardinal. So I'm gonna shade a little bit under the wing with a very sheer layer of black. Okay. Feel like he needs more red on him, but that's just me. Or maybe he needs more black, because their wings do have some black in them, so. Yeah, I'm not sure that helped. Not sure that helped, but okay. Alright, might leave the pink off of there because I don't think it's really doing anything for the painting at all. If you want to make pink, you can mix some white in with your red. Kind of give the look of some wings. I would say dry that and maybe wash over it with some red and call it good. Just so your white doesn't stand out so much on top. So I'm just going to make a little wash, mostly water, and we'll just wash this over our cardinal. It doesn't look like a cardinal. He's close enough to a cardinal. Okay, let's dry that guy. And I think we'll call this one done. I really love the colors of the background. Super cute. That bird is just so dark. I can't get that happy medium on this bird here. So, you know, just add some highlights on its wing. But I think he looks cute. I think the snowman is adorable. And I think I might finish out the branch with just a little bit of just white. maybe again. I need my paint to flow. Just some white highlights on here. Alrighty-daddy. I think we'll call this one done. That snowman is adorable. Love the colors. So cute. Alright everybody, thanks so much for joining me on this one. I hope you've enjoyed it. Grab your surface at pinecraftinc.com. Underneath my name, Lonna Lamb. It is my Sleigh surface if you're wanting this particular surface, and have fun with it, you guys. I can't wait to see you on the next one. I'll see you there. Thanks so much for painting with me, everybody. Bye-bye.